The Chargers will need major contributions from their first-year players if they want to contend this year, and there are two rookies that we think will make the all-rookie team in 2024.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 9 seasons now, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, I think when the Chargers took Joe Alt, who was the consensus top offensive lineman in the draft, and Junior Colson, they picked 2 players that are uniquely qualified to make the all-rookie team. And also, I think the Chargers made some necessary adjustments to their offense this year to be able to bring them and vault them into the top 15 of scoring offenses in 2024. And now is the time to pay Rashawn Slater.
Do it. He's earned it. Get bookend tackles for at least the next 5 seasons. As easy as that. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, it is buy or sell day, getting into their biggest Chargers overreactions and storylines. And the first one we have today is from Michael Bolton Up, who's asking, buy or sell, Chargers will have an offensive and defensive rookie that earned first-team all-rookie honors, and one of those rookies on offense or defense make a Pro Bowl in their rookie season. Thank you, dudes, for continuing to put out great content. This will be my 4th season with you guys. We appreciate you. The definition of an everydayer, and we have some people going back 9 seasons even to the Chargers domination live days, and some that have probably started today. So welcome in, everyone. You can always be an everydayer. I'm going to buy the all-rookie team guys. That is the part of this. The Pro Bowl is so subjective, and that gets a little tougher, fan voting and things like that being included in it. But I do think, for me, the 2 easiest ones to go with here are Junior Colson and Joe Alt. I would say that Junior Colson's the guy that I'm most confident about making the all-rookie team, but I think both of those dudes, even with some competition, should have a really good chance in 2024 to be 2 of the best at their positions.
I'm with you, Daniel. I mean, those are the 2 that I picked as well. I am also buying it. I think when they took Joe Alt, they took the consensus top offensive lineman in the draft. And so I feel like, among his competition at his position, I feel like he is in a very good spot to be able to take home those honors. And as far as Junior Colson is concerned, he is uniquely qualified to be able to take home that award, especially because he was drafted by the Chargers. When you get to play in the same defense that you played in college, and you have that intimate knowledge of all of the ins and outs of how that defense works and operates at the highest level, I think that really puts Junior Colson in a unique position to be able to go get that all-rookie team honors. As long as he stays healthy, I don't see any reason why he is not going to be a member of that team.
Yeah, and, maybe one of those guys can make the Pro Bowl as well. I do think really what you're stacking up to is how they're playing against their peers. And I think if you're doing that as far as the all-rookie team goes, I think the first thing you think of is opportunity. And I think with both of these guys, we feel great about their chances to be starting for the Chargers from week 1. We're obviously assuming health and other things like that, but if you're looking at Joe Alt, it was a very good tackle class. And you're talking about 2 guys that can make the all-rookie team. I mean, you're talking about multiple tackles taken in the top 10 this year. Talking about several guys getting taken in the top 15 this year, whether it's, Talisa Fuaga or Olu Fashanu or J.C. Latham, another guy that was connected with the Chargers even at the 5th overall pick. Those are what his competition is, and there's even some more guys. We'll see how many of them end up pushing inside to guard and what his real competition looks like there. But Joe Alt, I think the biggest thing is, can he transition to the right side? That's a question that we're not going to be able to know until the season starts. But I do feel good about saying, hey, he can be a top 2 tackle as a rookie amongst his rookie peers. And then with Junior Colson, you said it. I think the big thing here, too, is his peers aren't going into their own defensive system that they were in college. The other part of it is linebacker is an incredibly hard position to transition into the NFL. I mean, there was a few seasons back, dating ourselves, there was Devin Bush and Devin White that both went in the first round. Both of those dudes struggled as rookies. We saw Roquan Smith, who's one of the best linebackers in the game. He struggled as a rookie. So it's really hard to transition. I feel better about Junior Colson's chances than I do about a lot of the guys, because Junior Colson's competition, I mean, he's arguably the best linebacker coming out, right? I think if you're, want to argue it, you would say at least top 3. I think that's really the lowest that you could put him. I think
he's top 2, and he's not 2.
Sure, but he wasn't even the first linebacker taken in his draft class, right? So obviously other people felt differently about it. So I think that for him, I think he has less competition probably than Joe Alt does, especially as an inside linebacker, and 2 of those guys will make the team. I think the one here that's tough is Ladd McConkey, because I think with Ladd McConkey, we expect him to get the opportunity. I think with Ladd McConkey also, though, he has such stiff competition at that position. I mean, he was, the 7th wide receiver taken in this draft class, maybe even more. But then he has to make it, there 2 receivers got taken last year. And so you're talking about him beating out Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze and even other guys like Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy, guys that we all expect to have roles in their first season. Some of those guys going in as wide receiver 1. So I don't think that's impossible for Ladd McConkey, but he has a ton of competition, even though we expect him to maybe even, vie to be the Chargers' number 1 wide receiver.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. That's the other guy that I contemplated as well. But man, Daniel, that's going to be a really tough mountain to climb with the pedigree of the wide receivers that were taken in front of him. And also, those guys are stepping into their situations and very well could be the number 1 wide receiver for their teams right away. I think we feel good about Ladd McConkey's prospects of contributing in his rookie season, but I can't sit here and say right now definitively that he's going to be the Chargers' number 1 go-to guy.
I think the biggest thing with him is health, and I think he will have the opportunity. The connection with Justin Herbert seems to be growing day by day, and you love to see it. But yeah, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., who else do they have at wide receiver in Arizona? Malik Neighbors, who else do they have in New York at wide receiver? I mean, they have a bunch of guys, but those guys obviously go in as wide receiver 1. Rome Odunze, a little bit different, right? He has Keenan Allen and DJ Moore ahead of him. That's a great wide receiver trio they've put together, that as much as it kills me to say. But those guys, I think, have a better chance than Ladd McConkey does. From where they're taking. Obviously, we watched a lot of those guys too, with the wide receiver being such a possibility for the Chargers at pick 5. Let's get to one more here from Steve Gradius, who says, buy or sell. CJ Okoye makes the Chargers 53-man roster, presumably I'm going to say in 2024. David, are you buying or selling that CJ Okoye? Obviously, a really, really great story. We loved what we saw from him last year.
That one I'm have a hard time with, Daniel. I love that. I feel like I'm a big fan of CJ Okoye. I want to buy it, right? I want to buy in. But with CJ Okoye, he's way behind the 8 ball. He started football really, really late. And with Jim Harbaugh coming into the fold, there are expectations that this team is going to try to win right away. And I just think with that being said, I have to sell that he is going to make the 53-man roster. If you were asking me, is he going to make the practice squad? I feel like, if he's able to show out in training camp and ball out in the preseason, then I can see an avenue where he makes the practice squad for the Chargers.
And the thing is, I don't even know if practice squad's really an option, because I think if they're not going to have him be on the team, they can basically just make him an exempt player and he can stick around again and not count against a practice squad spot. So that's probably what they would do. It's just so incredibly hard to do what he's doing. There's so few cases of guys who've been able to pick up football as late as they have, like he has in his life, and then being able to make it to the NFL. You see guys try to do it all the time. There's a wrestler trying to make the Bills roster right now, right? So you see it, but this is a dude who started playing in Africa and is part of the international program for the NFL. I think we're going to see major improvements. He got a sack in the preseason last year. I watched him beat Zion Johnson in a one-on-one at practice. He made major strides. I think we're going to see the best version of him yet. I'm not ready to say he's going to make the opening 53-man roster yet. Practice squad, if they want to keep him as an option to go on the team potentially this year, maybe that's a long shot, but I think they'll probably keep him around. And if he keeps around, hey, maybe 2025, he can make that leap, because he'll have 2 years of NFL training camp experience and all that stuff under his belt. But we still have way more great buy or sells to get into, including why I'm going to tell you why. Not only do I think the Chargers are going to be a top 15 offense, I think they're absolutely going to be a top 10 offense in the NFL in 2024, and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, because summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, they have one of their best offers of the year going on. There was $150 in bonus bets, not anymore. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That means you can go with the biggest favorite on the money line, and as long as they win by whatever margin, you can win that $200 in bonus bets. For me, you know where I'm locked on right now, some would say, and it's the finals. It's hockey right now, and I have to go with my Ice Cats. Big game, 1 win. We're looking for the first ever Stanley Cup here, but I went with the -1.5 for the Panthers in the game 1. I'm going with anytime goal scorers in game 2. I like Sam Reinhart, the best power play scorer in the NHL this year, at +140 to get in. If you want to go dark horse, big odds, I like Sam Bennett to get the goal in the game 2 at +410. But make sure you guys get in on this action, because that is $200 in bonus bets you can use to bet on everything from the finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. David, let's continue this Chargers buy or sell, getting into the biggest storylines and overreactions. And we have a great one here calling in, I believe it's Grant. There's a little cutout, but we have a great voicemail has a good buy or sell for us this week.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, David. It's Grant Sipple from Portland, Oregon. Just thinking about some estimates on performance this next season. Hey, buy or sell, Chargers are going to have a top 15 scoring offense next year. Want to know your thoughts. Thanks, guys. See ya.
It's a good question, because I think a lot of people are questioning Greg Roman, or were at least with the hiring, especially going to a more run-heavy offense. Maybe the ball a little bit less in Justin Herbert's hands. So I get that buy or sell. I already said it. I'm buying this team to be a top 10 offense, not even a top 15 offense. I think they absolutely will do it in 2024. I don't even have much doubt about it.
I'm with you. I'm buying this as well. I think when you look at the top scoring offenses from last year, the teams like San Francisco and Baltimore and Detroit and Philadelphia, those are teams that all had very balanced offensive approaches. And that's exactly what the Chargers are vying to bring this year under Greg Roman and Mark Trestman. They want to have a balanced offense. They want to have a great running game, and they want to have some games and options for Justin Herbert to be able to air it out when necessary. But that's what I feel like is going to happen. Last year, the Chargers finished 21st in points per game at 20.4, and that was with almost no running game. That's with Mike Williams missing most of the year and Justin Herbert missing 4 games, almost probably 4.5 games if we want to be more accurate here. So given health and given this new approach on offense, I think there's no question that the Chargers will be one of the top scoring offenses in the NFL next year.
And I think that, and it's a great point about, a lot of those teams at the top that you're seeing as the highest scoring teams all have good running games and are all balanced attacks for the most part. But this is the other thing. Greg Roman's done it everywhere he's been. Yeah. He's had top 15 offenses. I mean, if you look at him in his time in San Francisco, they weren't known for being a high-powered offense. But from 2011 to 2013, they were 11th every single season in points per game. So they were inside that top 15. They were 25th in 2014, the year that Jim Harbaugh ended up getting fired. If you go look at the Ravens, 2019, they had the #1 offense in the league with the run-heavy attack that they had. 2020, they were 7th. 2021, 2022, they were 17th and 19th. But in both of those seasons, Lamar Jackson missed 5 games, which is kind of important, right? So I think they would have easily been top 15 offenses had Lamar Jackson not missed all of those games. And then I think if you even look at the Buffalo years, and the year and a half he was in Buffalo, they were 10th in one season and 12th in the other season as far as points per game goes. So just because Greg Roman wants to run it doesn't mean he hasn't had a top 15 scoring offense. I think with Justin Herbert and hopefully a good rushing attack to support him, they should easily be a top 10 offense in the NFL in 2024. But let's get to this next buy or sell here. See if this is an overreaction from Edgar Esk, who's saying, buy or sell, Joe Ortiz will eventually build a grittier, tougher team than A.J. Smith did during his time as GM for the Chargers. David, that's a tough test, right? That's a high bar that A.J. Smith, rest in peace, put up there. Are you buying or selling it?
Yeah, so when you look at the first few years under A.J. Smith, you got to think about who the head coach was, right? And that was Marty Schottenheimer from 2003 to 2006, the first kind of few years there. That's, I think, where, you feel like those were the grittiest, the toughest, most physical Chargers football teams in that tenure under A.J. Smith. And I think you look at who the Chargers have as head coach now, and that's Jim Harbaugh. And what is Jim Harbaugh going to demand? He's going to demand a physical, tough football team. Also, Joe Ortiz helped build and construct those teams in Baltimore, which are all very physical, very tough, very gritty football teams. So I think when you combined Joe Ortiz and his experience in Baltimore with Jim Harbaugh and the type of team that he requires, I think that equals a very gritty, very physical football team. That is why I am buying it.
I'm going to sell it. I'm going to say as tough in respect to A.J. Smith, who was obviously polarizing in his time as Chargers GM. And to give him the credit and the flowers that he deserves, he built the team for Marty Schottenheimer the way that Marty Schottenheimer wanted it. Marty Schottenheimer wanted a tough team, and he did that. They built one of the best rushing attacks in the entire league. They were run heavy. I mean, if I'm talking about grittiness and toughness, I'll just say one name, Lorenzo Neal. And Lorenzo Neal doesn't play for the 2024 Chargers. I'll tell you that right now. Neither does Jamal Williams. Neither does Sean Merriman or Igor Olshansky or Steven Cooper or Quentin Jammer. Yep. All these dudes were known for being tough. A mean-ass offensive line they had, right? Those dudes were mean, and we're going to take your lunch from you every single game. So out of respect, I do think they will make it as tough as those teams. I do think we will see kind of a reawakening of the toughness that Marty Schottenheimer, rest in peace, and A.J. Smith put together in easily the most successful Chargers era of my fandom, right? Of my pretty much my lifetime. But as long as I've covered the Chargers, that's the gold standard. And I think with all the things you brought up, they can get to that level. I'm going to sell it's going to be tougher or grittier, but I'm going to sell I'm going to buy that they can get to that level, with respect to the best teams that I've seen as a Chargers fan.
I'm with you on that.
Let's get to this next one here from FFI, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers actually stay relatively healthy this season and show up to the playoffs with the same roster that they started with. So this isn't really a playoff question. I think it's more of an end of the season question. I mean, I think we both said, hey, we expect this team to compete for a playoff spot in 2024. I'm going to buy it, David. I'm a firm believer in Ben Herbert, and I don't think it's going to be perfect, but I think it's going to be better than what we have seen.
Oh, I definitely believe in Ben John Wick Herbert, without a doubt. I feel like they're going to stay healthier because of the work that they're putting in right now, and they're going to improve the durability and the stamina, the fourth quarter finishing periods and things like that, which I think are going to help them be less susceptible to the injuries. I think that's where I'm at with it. I think the other part of that question was, are they going to stay with the same roster that they were with? I think that
just means like same roster as in like you're going to have the same team health-wise as you had at the beginning of the season as you had at the end of the season, as opposed to what we saw last year, right? Because by the end of last year, when the last season ended, who were you missing? You were missing Justin Herbert.
Right.
You were missing Keenan Allen.
Yep.
You were missing Mike Williams. You were missing Joey Bosa.
Yep.
Obviously, health reasons, you were missing Corey Linsley as well. But you're talking about, what, 5 of your top 10 to 12 players on the entire roster, right? So I think that's where what the point is. And it's like, hey, there were times that we've seen in the past when the Chargers made it to the playoffs and looked like kind of a shell of the team that got them there.
Yeah.
I think no better example than the Brandon Staley team in that Jacksonville Jaguars game, because what happened in Week 18? Brandon Staley made the dumb decision to play his stars in the last game of the season, and he lost his second best receiver, a dude who was absolutely, crucial to what they wanted to do offensively.
Yeah.
And then they ended up losing. Not saying it's because of that. Mike Williams probably makes a difference in that game, I would have to think.
Yeah,
at the same time, you're hoping to get there with all your guys intact, right? The Chargers barely had Joey Bosa back at that time, right? Trying to make a comeback. Rashawn Slater was out in that playoff game as well. Don't forget that, right? That's another big part of it. Jamari Sawyer kicking in, and he was, maybe Rashawn Slater would have made it back the next week. I definitely buy that. I think that, if you're talking about being that same team towards the end of the season, I think it's going to look a lot more like what the team starts as than the teams that we've seen actually get over the hump and make the playoffs in years past. But it is a great buy or sell, but I don't think that's an overreaction by any means. But we still have more great buy or sells to get into, including this one from Dro Talk SD, asking if we could see a Rashawn Slater extension before the start of the season. So we're going to get into that and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, David, let's continue getting into these Chargers buy or sells here. One of our favorite shows of the week. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the show at Locked On LAC on Twitter and who called into the voicemail line, like Grant at 323-524-7924. I also want to tell everyone to make sure that you guys are checking out the Locked On Sports Today first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today, now available free on the Fire TV channels app. Dave, let's get to this next buy or sell here from a frequent question asker, a frequent buy or sell giver here from Drotalk SD on Twitter, who says, buy or sell, we will see Rashawn Slater get an extension done before the start of the season. So we were going to make this training camp, but the Chargers in the past have been kind of weird about training camp. Some guys have held out a little bit. Usually it goes into training camp when we actually see these deals get done or right on the verge of it. David, do you think we see a deal get done with Rashawn Slater before the season?
I do. I'm going to buy it. But the reason why it's going to be, towards, the back end, right before the season starts is because this is going to be a gigantic contract. I mean, when you look at the top earners at the left tackle position in the NFL, according to Over the Cap, Laramie Tunsil's making, he's the top left tackle contract. He's making $25 million per season. And Andrew Thomas is making $23.5 million per season. So contracts of this size, they are going to take some time. There's a lot of details you got to iron out. You got to get it just right. But with Jim Harbaugh's affinity for offensive linemen, I think this is a deal that very much gets done. I feel like the Chargers have searched for many, many years to find that stalwart left tackle, the guy that has that lockdown and is honestly one of the best left tackles in the National Football League when he's healthy and he's on the football field. Rashawn Slater is tremendous. He has earned it. He is a spectacular player, and he deserves this contract. And if you want to get the best out of Justin Herbert, the best way to do that is to have a pair of tackles signed and locked and loaded for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and we've seen teams like the Detroit Lions who built their team that way. That was the big thing with the Bengals. Do you take Jamar Chase? Do you take Penei Sewell? All of that stuff. And it's worked out really for both of them. But at the same time, when you look at the Chargers, I think you have to do it. And one of the reasons you can afford to do it is because you have Joe Alt on a rookie contract for the next 5 seasons. So I think that's part of the thing that lends itself to being able to do it, because you're not having to pay 2 tackles top shelf money for the next 5 seasons. But I think with Rashawn Slater, the biggest thing is like the dude made an all-pro team, and the only other all-pro on the list was Trent Williams. That's the type of, air that we're talking about here. We're talking about a special player that was an all-pro as a rookie, tore his bicep and missed 14 games as a sophomore. And then in year 3, when he wasn't dealing with high ankle sprains, he still looked like that same dude. And I mean, we've watched him in practice. We've seen him in games. We've seen all of his games multiple times. Rashawn Slater deserves to get paid, and you have already shown that you want to build your team through the trenches. You can keep furthering that agenda by locking up one of your best players. I would say the other part of it is you don't have to get worried that it hasn't happened to this point, because this is all pretty standard as far as what the Chargers have done in years past. Yeah. We will see what happens with the new regime and Joe Ortiz. But Ed McGuire is still the cap guy. So I assume some of these things are still going to work similarly to how they have in the past, at least as far as when guys are signed and how these contracts get hashed out. I think you have Joe Ortiz that's going to be like, hey, I'm going to be deciding on the guys that we're going to extend, but it's going to be Ed McGuire who's going to be hashing out what the numbers are. And what we've seen in the past is the Chargers, either during training camp or right on the eve of training camp, is when they've got these deals done. If you go back to Justin Herbert, it happened on July 25th. If you go back to Joey Bosa, his happened on July 28th. Derwin James, remember, I ended up going to a training camp. It was kind of lightly working out. His ended up, kind of going a couple weeks later. That one didn't happen until August 17th. The other part that's important to remember, too, Rashawn Slater's under contract through 2025. They have exercised his 5th-year option, which is the least surprising thing in the world after declining Jerry Tillery's 5th-year option, the last one we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Obviously, they picked up Justin Herbert. It's another no-brainer. But it's not as if they get it done, he's not going to be with the team. I mean, I would be surprised if he even held out. Like, if you're talking about after next year, when he already be locked up under next year, could he hold out in 2025 to get a new deal? Yeah, he probably would deserve to.
Yeah.
They don't have to get it done this year. There's not really a rush to, but I think you do right by one of your best players because I've seen enough. Maybe they want to see one more year, but I would be really surprised with the tape that he's already put out there that they wouldn't say, hey, this guy is a foundational piece to what we want to build. And he is tough enough and rugged enough and gritty enough to be part of kind of the new culture that Jim Harbaugh is trying to build here. So let's get to this next buy or sell here. From Chris Saiz, one of the best out there, and he says, buy or sell, Hayden Hurst will lead pass catchers in one of three categories, either touchdowns, yards, or receptions. Me and you haven't talked about this, David. Are you buying any of those?
Yeah, so I am going to buy it. It's going to be one of them. I think it's actually going to be receptions. This is not going to be an offense that is going to be utilizing the running backs in the passing game. That's just not what they are going to be going. Not what they're going to be about. So there's going to be a large target share that's going to have to shift to somewhere else. And I think that is going to shift towards the tight ends. And I feel like Hayden Hurst is definitely going to be the primary pass catching option as far as the tight ends are concerned. So I feel like he could rack up a ton of catches and lead this team in receptions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll buy it that he could end up as the top three. And one of them, I think, as we always talk about, health is going to be a huge thing. It's probably going to be hard for him to lead the team in any of those categories if he can't play at least most of the season. And we're talking about a guy who hasn't played more than 13 games since 2019. So you have to keep that in perspective. And that was his best season. Because in that season, he scored more touchdowns than any Chargers receiving option ever has at the NFL, except for 1 year of DJ Chark in 2019 where he put up 8 touchdowns. I think it would be touchdowns if it's any of these things. And I think the main reason is, like, there's no go-to offensive red zone weapon right now, at least as far as like a jump ball guy. There's no Mike Williams on this team where, hey, you're going to throw a fade to this dude. I think there's guys that could work there. I don't think that's going to be what Ladd McConkey's strength is. I mean, Josh Palmer has only ever had 4 touchdowns in a season to max out. Quentin Johnston had 1 touchdown last year. So, like, if any of these, like, I could see Ladd McConkey leading this team in receptions. I could see Josh Palmer leading this team in receiving yards. Like there's different guys I could see leading in different categories. But I'd say out of the 3 of these, the one Hayden Hurst specifically is most likely to attain, I'd say it's probably receiving touchdowns, because I don't really know who the obvious red zone threat is on this team right now. It's not Will Dissly's game. Honestly, the guy who would be is probably Donald Parham. So maybe Donald Parham comes in and is kind of the touchdown vulture, that pass catching group.
I can see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Greg Roman's offense hasn't also been an offense that, is throwing a bunch of fade routes either, when it gets into the red zone. He's usually trying to pound the rock. So it might not be a huge number, but he might lead the team in receiving touchdowns in 2024. So let's get to this last one here, David, really quickly, from Drotalk SD on Twitter, who says, buy or sell, Gus Edwards will be a top 10 fantasy back in 2024. I'm going to sell it. I think it's a silly one. I don't even know who would put that in here. David, are you buying or selling it?
Very funny. I actually am also going to sell it. And the reason why is because when you look at the top 10 fantasy running backs, a lot of those guys are guys that catch the ball and run the ball. And Gus Edwards is not really a pass catching running back. I do feel like he is going to score a ton of touchdowns. He is going to be that kind of fantasy vulture where he scores a lot of those. And I feel like he's going to rack up points that way, but he doesn't have the well-rounded game that's going to put you in that top 10 fantasy running back realm.
I think the thing here is we've seen the top 2 running backs for this team actually playing Greg Roman's offense and saw what they did. And in their time, neither one of them cracked the top 10 in either standard scoring or PPR scoring. Obviously, in PPR, the receptions, the receiving yards, those things matter a lot more, or at least the receptions do, because you get a full point for it. The closest any of them have been was last year. Gus Edwards was 14th in standard scoring, the most touchdowns he's ever scored. And he was 14th, and that was under Todd Monken. So hard to compare that. But Greg Roman did have one top 10 fantasy running back in standard, standard issue fantasy, where you're getting 6 points for a touchdown, you're getting no points for receptions, and it was Mark Ingram in 2019 who had 1,000+ yards and 10 touchdowns. I think we know it's going to be a committee. I don't think any of these guys is going to be a top 10 fantasy running back unless J.K. Dobbins just grabs the position and runs. But I think he'll be hurt by Gus Edwards getting those vulture touchdowns and getting those kind of situations where I think Gus Edwards is going to be a totally touchdown dependent back. Like if he doesn't have a touchdown, he's probably not going to be a good fantasy back for you. And I think it's just going to be a committee that's going to kind of hurt all of them and maybe not make any of them a fantasy star in 2024. But I'm sure we'll do a fantasy show getting into kind of all the best prospects for the Chargers. Hayden Hurst may be a sleeper at the tight end position that could make some noise, so to speak. So that is going to do it for today's show. We'll be back with you guys on Wednesday talking about the Chargers practicing in San Diego. Camp Pendleton practice. We're hoping to get some media coverage of that so we can go cover that on Wednesday for you guys as we are in our 3-show-a-week thing. But it doesn't mean you still can't be an everydayer. And thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC for these buy or sells or called into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. You can also make sure you never miss the show by following us on Twitter where we post it every day. You can also follow my account at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD, as well as finding us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So mandatory minicamp this week. Be back here on Wednesday as we recap the Chargers Tuesday practice. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.